But
Yeah.
Because there's some circumstances I draft somebody. But I thought I'd bring up Calvin Ridley.
Oh, yeah. That was my backup. That was my number 2. So I'm glad we're saying this. Did you say one day?
I may end up drafting, but we'll talk about that. So.
All right, don't say who it is. We're live, boys. We're live. Let's get this thing started. You guys can do the big reveal on the show. We got a big guest. Let's get this thing going.
Yep.
All right, it's Boogie.
District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
Welcome, Fantasyland, to the GOAT District. I'm at JD GOAT District. January 18th, guys. We're kind of smack in the middle of the playoffs. We just finished Wild Card Weekend. Had some good football, some nice matchups, some a little lopsided, but still worth the watch. The excitement, especially if you got those playoff challenge entries in. Tonight, we bring in another master, guys. We have kind of this GM Masterclass that we've been loading up with some heavyweight, high stakes players, and that's what we do tonight. We've got a big one tonight, Dan. I know you're excited about this one, Theo. I know you guys are pumped to have this man on tonight. And I'll pass it, Dan. I'll pass it to you. I want a proper introduction for this man. I'll pass the mic to you, sir.
All right, yeah. So without further ado, Danny Mueller, ladies and gentlemen. He did promise us a tuxedo and top hat, but anyway, yeah, Danny is he's a fantastic player. I've known for several years now. I think probably the first time we ran across each other was probably in an auction draft that Jeremy was doing, and you were stopping by to see how things were going, and I've run across Danny several times since then. Probably the most memorable time was when I showed up to Vegas, and I had for some crazy reason I decided to check my luggage, and I ended up, and of course I brought a backpack and I had my my laptop in there, but I decided for the sake of just making things a little bit easier, I would put my power cord and into my carry, or not in my carry-on, but into my checked luggage. So anyway, I show up and I've got no power cord and no prospect of getting one, because I'm like checking around Vegas, and of course I can't find the power cord that I need. And so I'm kind of panicking because I didn't bring any cheat sheets or anything. I was planning on being 100% on the laptop, so I'm like, what the heck am I going to do? I'm going to get eaten alive here in Vegas with, and I had a draft coming up that night, so it was like panic time. So anyway, I'd taken to Twitter and, expressed my frustration, and Jeremy and Danny, Jeremy was his partner at the time. Jeremy said, why don't you come over to, are you staying in Planet Hollywood? And I said, yeah, I am. He says, why don't you come over to my room? He goes, I got some cheat sheets I can hook you up with. And so I came down there, met him and Danny, and, this was cheat sheets that these two had put together. So they gave me their own private cheat sheets.
That's a goat move right there.
Yes, it is. And, just said, anything we can do to help out, just let us know. And, if you need more, just let us know, all this kind of stuff. And it was fantastic. It ended up that, I was able to get a power cord and, make things work out. But it was sure handy having that first night because, the first night I did not have access to any of that. So I was just basically going off those cheat sheets. So I really appreciate that. And that shows you, what a great guy Danny is. And, what he'll do for a person, we barely even met before, just in passing, as Danny was saying beforehand, we didn't really even know each other's name that well at that point. And, to be willing to do that was very memorable. And the reason why we have Danny on the show, of course, is because he's a fantastic player as well, as being just a really nice guy. And so he came in second place overall in the RotoWire online challenge that the NFFC runs. I've run across Danny in many best balls, and it's hard to get the best of him in those. And I believe the KFFC, you guys won that a couple of years ago, didn't you? Was it 2019?
Yeah.
Okay. 2019, they won the KFFC, and and then one of the silver bullet, runner up in a prime time, so a lot of great leagues. I mean, basically anytime you're in a league with Danny, you've got your hands full. So welcome to the show, Danny. That's my long and roundabout introduction, but thanks once again for being the guy that you are.
I get asked the question, how many leagues have you won? It's kind of like you're drinking beer and you get in trouble, and they ask you, how many beers did you have to drink? A couple. So I've won a couple leagues. Okay.
I love that. Yeah,
that's awesome.
That was.
Now, I subscribe to the Groucho Mark philosophy. I don't want to be part of any organization that would have me as a member. So you guys invite me on a podcast, and you're going to have somebody like me on a podcast. I don't know if I want to be on there. No,
there
really,
you go.
It's an honor. I really respect you guys.
Oh, we appreciate it. We respect you as well. So,
and I'll confess to two things. First, just being rigorously honest, I lose more leagues than I win. That's probably not true with anybody else like you guys or anything. Also, I'm a master thief. I steal from everybody. Steal strategies. Everything is a conglomeration of stuff I've stolen at the FFPC main events, talking to people and observing what others do in drafts and so forth. And you just can't count out experience. You have to work at this for a period of time. Yep. Anyway, I'll quit interrupting and let you go on with your show.
No, I think that's a couple of good points. Being profitable in fantasy football still means you're probably losing more leagues than you're winning. If you win more leagues than you lose, you have had an extremely profitable year, no question about it. And the other thing is it's a great point about just walking around and talking to people and stealing ideas from other people. That's a lot of what I do.
Which is basically what our show is based off of when you think about it. That's why we keep bringing in these awesome guests. And I almost cut in there to say, you read any, mastery book or any successful, in any industry, and they'll tell you the same thing. You want to surround yourself with smart people and people that are, maybe have more knowledge in a department that maybe you don't, like I love owning teams with Dan because he's the waiver wire master, and I just do not like doing waiver wire bids, and he's awesome at it. So we make a great team, and no, that's great, man. And just what you said earlier means a lot to us coming from you, Danny. We really appreciate that. I think we lost Theo again, so he might be in and out. He's having, I don't know if do they have a storm down there today? I know we got dumped on last night. But he's been having Wi-Fi issues. So if he's in and out, guys, just excuse the man.
Yeah, it sounds like he might be having a storm of his kids' devices connected to the internet as well. So.
The Netflix streams are going mad right now. All right. So guys, tonight, whether you play Dynasty, Best Ball, Redraft, Playoff Challenge, if you are in any way in fantasy, you will benefit tonight big time. And I can guarantee you that not all your league mates are listening to this show tonight. Well, I mean, I'd love to say they are, and maybe they are, but there's a good chance you're getting a bit of an edge here. And this is the time of year, Dan, we own teams together where I like to take advantage of that edge and get in early on some of these values. So tonight we're going to get into some players maybe that you want to avoid. We'll even look at an early draft board, a best ball draft board. Dan discovered this, did some deep dive research, and found the first draft board that we could find. So we'll look at that later. But like I said, guys, we'll start with the GM Masterclass. Smash the like button, smash the subscribe. There's a reminder button you guys can tap on. That's how you guys show support. That's how you give us support. Nobody's making money off this thing. We do this just because we love talking fantasy. We love having these guests on, and we love having you guys tuning in. So let's get into the goodness, guys. GM Masterclass. Dan, I'm letting you start this off because you did a little edit coming into this. So I'm going to give you the first one, brother.
All right. Sounds good. So one thing we like to do is talk to our guests just a little bit about, how they handle their portfolio and their, go through their season and all that. So, I guess we'll just start with that, Danny. What does your seasonal portfolio usually look like? Like, how many different teams do you have? How many different platforms are you on? How many different styles of fantasy are you playing? And kind of how do you manage that to start off with?
Well, I think I've got like 35 dynasties, but they're all on MFL. And I don't even know if they're worthwhile because they're just like $100 leagues, a couple $100 leagues. And I traditionally do a lot of FFPC. Now this year I ventured into the NFC. I hadn't been there since 2015, and I got intrigued with their format, and I think I'll give it a try. And I got in it, and I kind of got hooked. And I've been doing the KSFFC for several years, and that's a wonderful event to go to. Let's see what else. Of course, a lot of best balls, but only on. I used to do MFL 10s way back, and y'all sent me a draft board of evidently some best ball went off. Mm-hmm. I never draft during tax season. I just don't have time. But right after April 15th, I would jump in the MFL 10s, and it's like taking candy from a baby. And I had one philosophy is don't draft rookies. And I'd make a 4-to-1 profit. And I'd only do about 40, and then I'd start getting into the FFPC stuff and so on. But I'm kind of deviating from your question, but the problem is all these leagues, it's kind of evolved. I mean, I started out with spreadsheets. My God, that's a lot of work. You go through waivers, you have to change players and everything. And you go to pick lineups, and you want to study I'm kind of a projection studying guy. I like to study projections. And I ran into David Dodds at the FFPC, and I said, I wish y'all had a league management software. I know you have one, but it only does 10 leagues, and I can't figure out which 10 I want to put on there. Said, we've expanded it now. It can cover as many leagues as you want. And I said, really? And so I looked into it, and I had done Fantasy Pros they've got a deal that's a little cumbersome. But I tried the football guys league manager, and that is awesome. I mean, I can pull all my dynasty leagues in there. The only one I can't pull in there is my Kentucky leagues. And they all appear on, you scroll down the page, and it's got all the lineups and the players that are available, waivers and so forth, and projections and so forth. I mean, it's all there. And so it's really helpful when I'm going through my waiver wires and everything and setting lineups. I don't necessarily agree with their projections, but, I make my own decisions with that. But it's nice to pull it up, and it shows you all the waiver wires that are available, running backs that you don't have on your team and no one else does. So it helps me narrow my targets down a little bit. Now, The FFPC, is really good about, you can go in there and look for a free agent and sort it. And, I really like that feature. On Monday nights, that's what I'm doing when I'm watching the Monday night game. Is I'm, putting some targets in there and locating what leagues they're in and creating a little dollar bid for them and so forth. I think I never could figure out NFC that you could do that at the NFC. And if you can, tell me how to do it. But I know they have a percentage rostered. Anyway, I'm kind of wandering around there, but I really like that software.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, just something to keep yourself organized, makes it a ton easier. And, as you said in the FFPC, just getting in there and kind of doing some dollar bids on Monday night, that's exactly the same kind of thing that I do. Is I just get in there and, I throw together a bunch of dollar bids for all my leagues. And, I just do that on Monday, Tuesday, whenever I have time, and then run back through. And, on Wednesday, when we start getting the practice reports rolling in, that's when I start thinking about how much do I really want to spend here.
And you can make that when you first see in that question, I go, well, are you talking about the player makeup or what? I wasn't exactly sure what you was asking there, because that'll vary from league to league and draft to draft. And
yeah, it's mostly just, trying to keep everything straight. Okay, now I'm on this, I'm on this platform, so I'm using this scoring system, or, switching into your Dynasty frame of mind for those leagues, and then switching back to redraft frame of mind. Any tips or anything you have on that, or do you just, is that something that comes pretty natural at this point?
Well, in that software, it pulls the scoring system from your league and puts it there, and it's pretty accurate. And that was always a problem in the past. Is you look, particularly if you look at projections with the FFPC, you got 1.5 points per tight end, and that's unique to all the others. And so that was a bit of a problem in the past, but that software kind of solves all that. Except for the KFFC, I have to do it old style on a spreadsheet.
And can I just point out something that, the casual thing Danny just dropped there. He hadn't played the NFFC since 2015, but he just, he thought he'd give it a try this year and only came in, second in the, in the biggest contest that they have. No big deal.
Well, I remember when we got it in 15 and we made money and made profit on it. And I don't know why we didn't go back to it. I did do some, what do they call them? They're draft champions or something?
Yeah.
Draft champions. Yep.
And I did real well with it. But it was annoying because back in those days, it was 35 rounds. And man, I'm dead tired. Just throw anybody in there.
Auto draft after the 29th.
So
yep. Yeah.
I didn't even look to see if they've changed that to a more manageable number for me. I mean,
they still have some 35 rounders.
I can't be drafting at midnight, but I may try out a few again this year at the NFC. My biggest challenge is trying to get used to their software. How do you do waivers? How do you do this? How do you set lineups? And
yeah, the FFPC definitely does a good job of making that easy. It's up front. You go in, you've got all your teams. You can look at your ownership. You can manage the teams. It's easy to get in the waivers and see who the free agents. So that's actually a very valid point.
Yeah, they've got that manage all your leagues, which is really cool. And I couldn't find a version of that in NFC, but I did find that you could put a player in there and it'd tell you what leagues they're in. And that was, when I discovered that, I was going, oh my God, this helps a lot.
Yep. For sure.
Even the NFC transferred over to the league software, football guys. So I was worried about that, but it transferred over and worked real well.
Yeah, the main thing I have to worry about is on the NFFC, you've got to hit save on your roster, unlike the FFPC.
Yes.
you don't have to do anything special. You just
even in the playoffs, even in their playoff challenge, Dan, I noticed that I almost missed it because I was used to the FFPC, and you make sure you press save on NFFC for sure.
Yep, exactly. I got caught out on that a couple times my first year doing it, and eventually got into the habit of because I would just I would exit the whole page without ever looking at it. I would just switch over to a different browser tab and then just never come back to it. So that was the difficult part for me, was just getting used to that. But, overall, it's once you get used to that software, it works out pretty well too.
Anytime you get on these new formats, it's just getting the lay of the land and getting used to it. But, it becomes like second nature after a while.
Yep. So, Danny, when you're making your sit-start decisions, anything that you do that, any particular rules of thumb that you use or anything like that?
Well, I remember many, many years ago, I was at the FFPC, and somebody I really respect was drafting there. Finished with the draft, and I said, what was you doing there? And he says, I do a lot of leagues, and I want my lineup decisions to be as easy as possible. And I took that to heart, that when I'm doing the draft, I'm wanting to make my lineup decisions as easy as possible. And another lesson I learned is early on, when I really didn't know what I was doing at the FFPC, we did this draft, and back then we were just running back whores. We was drafting running backs like crazy, and somebody came up and he was being honest with his assessment of our draft. He said, you don't have enough yellow on that board. So, why, are receivers that important? And of course, reading, studying and everything, I've changed my opinion on that. Now I'm kind of more of a wide receiver whore. But I remember many years back, Sean Siegel, and he was revealing his zero running back strategy. He made this comment, and he says, I want to crush my opponents during the bye weeks. And so I've taken that to heart. So when I'm doing a draft, I'm trying strategically to alter my bye weeks so I don't have very many bye week problems during the bye week run. And try to make my lineup as easy to set as I can, which in NFFC was really the hero running back was the easiest. My only main decision was that dadgum second running back, and everything else was pretty easy. Like the one I come in second, I only had one roster decision to make. Everything else was just pretty cut and dried, and that's the way it was with most of my leagues. Is usually just one or two positions that I had to make a decision on. And I'd think about that throughout the week, read matchup columns and do research and everything, and make the final decision on Sunday morning. Just go in there and say, this is the way I'm going, live or die. And sometimes that's gut feeling. Sometimes it's just a conglomeration of things I've read. And it's not an easy thing, I remember Matt Waldman said something once, and his was a little different. He said the fantasy season's a 4-legged stool. But with us, it's a 3-legged stool because trading was one of the legs. It's the draft, it's the lineup decision, and it's the waiver wire. You got to work all three of those. You just can't, I did a good draft, I'm good to go. You've got to work that waiver wire like crazy. And that's a learning process that I've stolen from many people there going to these events, and from sharp people that I respect. And the lineup decisions. And the lineup decision is, to me, is the toughest part, in some instances. But I try to make those lineup decisions as easy as I can in the draft process. And that doesn't work out so well because you can have injuries. You can have it perfectly lined out where you only have one guy on a bye, but this other guy's hurt or on COVID or something, and that creates problems. So we just have to deal with those as we go.
Yep.
I hope
Yeah.
that makes sense. So
You are, and I just need to point out too that is he's talking about his drafting and all of this. This is the league that Danny got his second place in the RotoWire online challenge. And if those who are familiar with high stakes fantasy football and specifically with the NFFC are probably going to recognize a name or two here. I happen to see Theo's name is on here, along with looks like Sousa was your partner. Was there some Sousa guy?
I had a good partner for that draft. It didn't work out so well, but I had a very good partner.
I mean, this is really like a who's who. I mean, you got Glenn Lowry, you got Lewis Weber, Robert Crematola, Renugan, Kyle Yates, Duke is in there. Roger Gonzalez is in there. I mean, this is like an all-star league, and Danny just casually, drafts in this league and pulls out second overall. Just absolutely amazing. I thought it was a pretty spectacular feat, just finishing second. And then when I pulled up the league that you were in and I saw who was in there, I was like, yeah, this is pretty amazing. Theo, I mean, how did you guys let him have this team? What was going on there?
That will be all through it.
I don't remember this exact draft, but I remember I was in a couple drafts this summer where it was like Glenn Lowy and Lou Weber in every single draft. But yeah, no, hats off to you, Danny. This was definitely a tough group, and Derek Stoudemire is also a really, really good NFFC player. You see him a lot. So this league, when you recognize every single name in the league, it's usually a really, really bad thing. So, congrats to you for all your success in this league, and how well you did in the overall was really, really, really impressive.
The thing with the NFC is you use your names, and I probably know a lot of those guys, but I don't recognize the names because I'm drafting at the FFPC, and everybody goes by aliases and everything. So when I go to the FFPC, I run into somebody and I say, well, what team name do you have? And they'll tell me their team name. I go, oh, I know who you are. And here they got their names, and I don't see their team name that they use at the FFPC, so I don't know if I know them or not. I knew you and Sosa was in that draft.
And we got to give Theo and Nelson their due. They did come in second. So that's definitely good.
We were neck and neck throughout the season, and I finally pulled ahead. But it was y'all come in second, and we was nip and tuck there for a while.
Theo, talk about that, man. That's a pretty. He cut out. I just want him to comment on that because I know he teamed up with a couple good co-owners, and Sousa was definitely one of them. So I just wanted to hear his input on that. But like we said, guys, we've got a bit of a connection issue with Theo tonight. No problem there. Why don't we go to a question from fantasy data? What do you consider zero RB? We talked about it. You talked about Sean Siegel, who's obviously someone that the industry respects. Talking about his zero RB. What do you consider RB? Is it based on the rounds that you start drafting the running backs, or is it more about kind of the roster construction, or a combination of both?
Well, that gets into semantics now. To me, a pure zero RB is you'll start off with 4 or 5 receivers immediately, and then don't hit a running back until like round 6 or 7 or 8 or so forth, sometimes even later. And at the FFPC, you'll mix in tight ends in that group too, because they're essentially like receivers. I've kind of, a lot of this I kind of got from best ball. My best successes with best ball was, now they've given a name to it. They call it hero running back or anchor running back, or I've heard various terms. Is I want to get a running back in the first or second round, and then pound receivers for about 4 rounds, and maybe a tight end if I'm in the FFPC. FFPC is a little bit of a different animal, but NFFC was more conducive to the way I draft best balls. So that's what kind of attracted me to it. And Theo, I've heard you use this term. I was in some drafts. You said punt to running back 2. And So that's kind of what I did. And then what I'm working on the rest of the year is trying to find a running back too that gets me some decent production. And a funny thing in that draft is that was my third draft. And going into it, I was looking at I studied draft boards like crazy. And I'm going, Devontae Adams has fallen to the second round. And that was in the period where Aaron Rodgers, we weren't sure if he's going to be at Green Bay. And I said, I'm just going to make a gamble. I seen my draft slot was at 7. And I said, I'm going to make a gamble that Rodgers is going to come back. So I'm going to draft Devontae Adams in the second round. And I was sweating it whether he's going to make it to me. And he did. And I grabbed Jonathan Taylor at the 7.
I was going to say Adams and JT were the two guys that fell into the second from that first, and people who grabbed them when that value dropped are feeling good about it. I'm sure they did well during the season.
But it was the only draft I had the guts to do that, make that wager, that Rodgers was going to be back.
So can I ask you something on that? Do you go with conviction in those scenarios and you pick a kind of a storyline and stick to that and draft that way? Or do you try to play both sides of the fence and kind of balance it out when you're building your rosters?
I'm not sure if I quite get your question there. So,
like whenever a guy like Adams or JT falls, and you talked about Rodgers, you kind of had in your mindset that Rodgers was going to be there in Green Bay, and that's why you were comfortable taking Adams. Do you find conviction in those scenarios where people are on the fence and you kind of take one side and draft that way, or do you kind of like to balance how you approach that maybe questionable situation?
Well, I don't do that in every draft, but sometimes I'll just, it's kind of like placing a wager.
Yes.
Okay. I read this book a couple years ago called Life in Bets, and I thought it was about poker, and I really wasn't that interested in it, but I read a book review on it, and it was a really good book. And she made the comparison that everybody thinks life is like checkers, and you make all these strategic moves, and you make all the right moves, you win. And she said it's more like poker because there's random events that happen. So really we're placing bets in all our decisions in life. And so sometimes I'll go, well, I'm going to place a bet that Aaron Rodgers is going to be back, and he was falling way down in the draft. And Adams was falling in the mid-second, and I had the opportunity to grab somebody like Taylor there in the middle. So I said, let's just go there. And I had to sweat out Adams falling to me in the middle of the round, and he made it. And Rodgers fell, playing chicken about when I'm going to draft Rodgers. I waited as long as I could, and then finally I was able to secure him at a good spot. And that it just worked out this time. Now I've done this sort of thing before, and it's
gone the other way.
Yeah, gone the other way.
I think that's a big key of the these contest leagues is you're never going to win if you're afraid to lose.
You're placing a bet with every draft pick you make, and sometimes the drafts are dictated on your draft position and just what happened, weird things that happened during the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I remember last year, I was interviewing a guy that either he won the FBG tournament or the other one, and he's drafting from the 6 hole. He drafted Kamara. Now, virtually all my draft picks I ever had in the FFPC last year was at the 5, 6, and 7. Just every one of them. Kamara never fell to me in the 6. And they said, what made you draft Kamara at pick number 6? Who wouldn't? I'd have peed my pants if he'd have fell to me in the 6th. And Diggs falls in the 7th. Why did you draft Diggs in the 7th? He's the prettiest ugly sister there, and turns out he's league winner. That kind of compares to Debo this year. Now, he fell to the 7th just like Diggs did last year. Is that a pattern that we're looking for somebody to break out in the 7th round like Diggs did the year before or Debo?
I hope you all got your pen and papers and smashing that like button because the goodness is dropping in bunches.
And I did get Diggs in a few leagues last year, but it was just like Most of them was like Kentucky. I had a lot of digs in Kentucky, and I won. I did really well in Kentucky last year because I had digs, and it's because they draft receivers so heavily. Diggs was in the 6th, and it's like, well, I need a 4th receiver. At least I know this guy's good. I don't know if he's going to produce he'll surely produce as a flex receiver. And turns out he's a league winner. Is that way with Debo this year? He fell in the same spot. And I just wonder if that's a pattern that we need to exploit going forward. You kind of brought it up, about drafting Debo in your last couple of podcasts ago. I've been intrigued with that thought.
So it's almost, if there's questions at quarterbacks, the value kind of presents itself.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And, I do think there is something to that, range of wide receivers that there's often somebody in there, because you're kind of at that intersection where there's still a lot of talent on the board, but it's starting to dry up. And, but the hot commodities are already gone. So, being willing to grab that guy that's maybe not as quite as hot of a commodity, rather than, just pivoting over to a different position where maybe, there's somebody that appears a little bit better on the surface, one of the reasons I've said this often on this podcast, I didn't get enough Debo last year because I was constantly pivoted over to another position. I was usually taking a quarterback there. I was taking a running back or sometimes a tight end, but wide receiver was low on my priority list because I'd already addressed it or, whatever. I just wasn't feeling the wide receivers there. And, I should have been more willing to say what could go right with Debo rather than what could go wrong.
Well, I was kind of like you, didn't follow my pattern in my drafting, but also, going in, if you bought into the narrative of the league, is that Trey Lance is going to be the quarterback. He doesn't throw that much. They're going to run the ball. And I remember Debo from 2 years ago, and I drafted him in some dynasties, but suddenly he kind of exploded, and anybody that looked at him said he's a dynamic player, and he is a hot waiver wire pick, and I wasn't able to get him on the waiver wire. Then a couple weeks later, he gets hurt, and he doesn't hardly play the rest of the year. And it's like, whew, I dodged a bullet. I didn't secure him on the waiver wire. And last year he was hurt a lot and didn't play very much. So it's like 2 years in a row. So to me, I'm looking at that and I'm going, they may not throw the ball to him, and he gets hurt a lot. There's more of a risk there. So he really wasn't that high on my list, to be honest with you. And that was a mistake.
I thought that was very interesting, Danny, bringing up how we've seen the league winner wide receiver. Obviously Cooper Kupp was the league winner wide receiver, but the value league winner wide receiver going in that 6th, 7th round range. And then to take what Dan said, and just knowing the way Dan built some of his teams this year, where, you get the anchor RB and then you load it up on wide receivers the next few rounds. I think that the hero RB build sometimes leaves some wide receivers that get overlooked in that 6th, 7th round. Just basically, you're taking a running back and then you're hitting wide receiver maybe 3 straight rounds. So you're naturally pivoting over. I think this year, anchor RB type teams need to kind of take a step back and, consider drafting a wide receiver in that 6th, 7th round and maybe adjusting their strategy, even if it means taking an extra wide receiver, just because we've seen it 2 years in a row. The market has not adjusted. And I'll throw out that Jamar Chase was going in that 6th round in a lot of FFPC drafts. When it came down to those drafts right before the season, he had slipped down into almost that range as well. So there was just great value right there that maybe people were kind of not necessarily overlooking, but structurally not considering.
Or are they just committing too much to the way they want to build the roster going into the draft. And I feel like that's a mistake a lot of people make. They're like, okay, I just, you talked about Danny going super RB heavy, and maybe they've done a few of those, and now they want to mix it up and do the hero RB. And now they're going in. And even though some of these guys are at a value, they're dismissing it because they want to build that roster in a certain way.
I think we also have the perception of tiers where wide receiver, the tier breaks are there. But then when you get to a certain point, it's a broad tier of players that'll have this similar range of outcomes, and maybe we need to kind of take a step back and see if maybe there's a couple guys who are going a little bit deeper that might have the same range of outcomes as a guy that's maybe 10 spots higher than him in wide receiver ADP. It's a passing league, and more guys are coming into the league making an impact from year one, and I just think we need to kind of open up our horizons in where we're attacking that position to make sure we get as many of these potentially, smash play wide receivers as possible.
I was, y'all had Chad Schrader on there, and I've heard several podcasts. I met him in Kentucky, and, he says he doesn't draft until mid-August because he doesn't have that bias of narratives. And I've been thinking about that an awful lot since the last season ended, about how I'd start with a narrative and I'd get swayed to another narrative. And if I would have stuck with my original narrative, I'd have been better off. Like I watched the Super Bowl, the playoffs last year, and I go, this Leonard Fournette looks like he's figuring it out. And he's starting to catch passes. I need to draft him. And then I get talked out of it when I get into draft season, because I don't really start drafting redrafts till in July. Here I did it in July and August. And by then I was like, Gio Bernard's in there. He's a turd. And you see people go on draft boards and they say, oh, like he was talking about, oh, you drafted Fournette. And you get swayed by that. If I would have stuck with my conviction and going in, I'd have had a whole lot more Fournette on leagues. And it's just like, I need to look at that. And I've uncovered several narratives that I got off on. Like I got swayed into drafting Ayuk higher than I should.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Same.
Leagues. And because I listened to some podcast that said, well, he's going to break out this year, and studied all his routes and everything. And it's like, well, maybe I need to start thinking about Ayuk a little sooner. And that turned out to be a bad deal. So I guess I kind of pondered on my mistakes, and I'm going to be more careful about this year and not get swayed by what happens. One thing I've noticed is whenever I do a draft and it posts out there and somebody comments, oh, the guy at the 3-hole killed that draft. And I know right then that's going to be my worst team. It'll come out the worst. And when they say the guy drafted the 9, he had a sucky draft, that's the one that's going to win the league. It just never fails.
Yeah, definitely. Twitter is it's a lot of fun to participate in, but at the same time, you don't want to take it too seriously. There's a lot of groupthink out there, and also, I think it just kind of leads people to drifting more towards the shiny new stuff and the hot commodities and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times that's not really where your leagues are won, because everybody's valuing them the same. It's the people who are able to kind of sift the diamonds out of the trash that are going to win the leagues.
And sometimes I wish I wasn't such a coward. Last year, I really liked Justin Jefferson. I remember reading on RotoViz, they put it up every year. You remember back in the day, it said third-year wide receivers target those because they're going to break out. And they pinpointed that rookies that perform at this level, the next year they go to this level. So, and I noticed that happens a lot. So I was, had a priority to pick receivers that broke out in their rookie year because I thought they was going to do better the next year, like T. Higgins and Justin Jefferson. And, Jefferson was on Nelson's fade list, and I read his logic, but I didn't agree with it. And I was wanting to draft Jefferson. I mean, that was my goal going over draft. I'm going to get Justin Jefferson. And in the NFC is kind of weird. Of all the draft slots, 60% of my leagues were drafting at 11 and 12. So I should be able to get Justin Jefferson there at the turn of the 3. Well, he'd get picked at the end of the 2nd and wouldn't fall to me in the 3rd. And if he didn't, then A.J. Brown would be there. And I go, oh, God, I can't pass up A.J. Brown because Dan Williams thinks he should be.
Nice.
Oh, no.
Nice.
So I had
I've taken down an empire.
Now, why didn't I value him higher with my conviction? Because I believed he was a better receiver than that. Why didn't I think enough of him to draft him in the 2nd round? I just didn't. I was a coward. What can I say? I mean,
and that's why I asked you, Danny, about conviction, because the one thing I've learned from these playoff challenges is next year I'm going to stick to my conviction when I build these rosters. I start building them, and I don't know if anyone else does this, but you start worrying about being contrarian and different, and next thing you know, your roster looks completely different than the way you think that the playoffs are going to go. So that's my rule for next year. This playoff challenge is stick to my conviction and build my rosters that way.
Well, the only conviction I really stuck with after last year's Super Bowl and the playoffs is I'm going to draft Tom Brady. And I drafted him as many times as I could. And he was on all my winning leagues.
Speaking of goats.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it was the Tampa Bay stacks were very good to us. And until they weren't right at the end. But if you had the horses to survive that, you were in good shape. I mean, it was like just a bad week in there. But overall, yeah, Brady was such a value this entire year.
Shout out to Gilds in the chat, who's got a really good NFFC playoff team, and he wanted your opinion on who to pair up with Mahomes. Are you going Tyreek or are you going Kelsey? And what do you expect the ownership? This question for all you guys.
I have the same decision to make because I had Dak and Mahomes and expecting Dak to be out in the 1st round so I could replace him with one of the other guys.
No, this one so he has Mahomes and now he gets to sub in.
No, I totally get it. Yeah, that's the same scenario in him. My 2 quarterbacks were Dak and Mahomes. So Mahomes obviously keeps going. Now I can replace one of my other guys with what he's asking, either Kelsey or Hill. And I've got Dak as my other quarterback, but I picked him thinking I'm going to lose him in the 1st round, but that he's going to score enough. I should have just taken Josh Allen. That's basically what I'm saying. But I'm curious to know, Danny, how you feel going into the next weekend against the Bills. Would you go Kelsey or Tyreek if you're looking to stack your Mahomes in the quarterback position?
Gosh, that's kind of caught me off guard. I really don't like playing in playoff leagues. I've only done it at the FFPC. Now, I wasn't going to do any this year, but I listen to all these podcasts and they're going through all these strategies. And it's like I'm hearing a siren song and I'm going to jump in.
Hey, Alex, you listening right now? Shout out to the FFPC.
So I waited till Saturday and I go, well, I'm going to pull it up and they're going to be sold out. And that makes a decision for me. And there were still like 100 leagues in there. And I go, crap. So I got 2. And I did listen to a podcast about the NFFC and it hurt my head with that strategy. It's like, oh my God.
Was that the one with Dwayne McFarland?
I think it was Cody Carpentier.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I heard that one too.
It's like, man, that's a complex animal.
Mm-hmm.
All the 3-time stuff and all that. And I go, gee, I'm doing that one.
It's very tough.
Yeah.
Since I wouldn't be researching lineups, I'd be looking at how well Buffalo defends against the tight end versus the receiver.
As simple as that, right? Looking at the position, defense versus the position.
Yeah, I think Kelsey is definitely going to get more ownership on that. I think Tyreek just hasn't performed super well past few games, so I think that's going to push a lot more people over to Kelsey, who has for the most part performed. So if you're looking to be contrarian, then I think it's got to be Tyreek over Kelsey. But the thing is, if Kelsey's the right answer, Kelsey's the right answer. So, being contrarian can only get you so far.
Yeah, but Dan, people thought Cup was the right answer in the first round, and
I don't know. I mean, I think everybody was just afraid to not draft Cup, and it could be the same thing with Kelsey. Everybody's just afraid to not draft him, right?
I know. I've got Kelsey in one of my playoff leagues, so and I've got Mahomes.
It's interesting. I mean, this one's super interesting. I know that last year in the playoffs was the Tyreek went for like 175 against the Bills, but Kelsey also had a smash game. And then when they played again this year, I believe Kelsey might have scored, but their targets and catches and yardage were quite similar. So I don't know. It's
NFFC is not tight end premium, right?
No,
it's not tight end premium. No, not tight end
so
premium.
Does that play a factor when it's like that close between the two guys? Would you maybe lean Kelsey in the FFPC and lean Hill in the NFFC, or that's not relevant?
I think everything being equal, yes. But I do think in the FFPC, if you were going to try to go for the contrarian play, I mean, Hill is such an easy contrarian play off of Kelsey, who's going to be, hugely owned. But NFFC, like Dan said, it still might be Kelsey. I think basically because of the consistency. I might go Tyreek Hill. I mean, this game to me just screams shootout. And I think that they're going to have to go to Tyreek. But that's more of a gut than anything. And I think just based off what Dan said, I think he's pretty good at predicting these ownership percentages. You might get a little less owned Tyreek compared to Kelsey as well. So contrarian wise, and I also like play, I'm probably leaning Tyreek, but man, it's a hard one.
Yeah, and the thing is with the NFFC, you also have to think about not only what is, assuming that if you took Mahomes, then you're planning for Kansas City to go to the Super Bowl, right? So you have to be thinking not just this week, but also week 3, week 4. Because you're going to have a 3X and a 4X, excuse me, a 2X and a 3X for either Tyreek or Kelsey, right? So if even if you think Kelsey might be the one who outscores Tyreek this week, if you think that Tyreek is going to outscore Kelsey in the Super Bowl, you can still come out a winner by taking Tyreek. So really you want to think about, how many points are they going to score, at each level of the playoffs? What's your projection for each of those games, and then just kind of work it back. And that's what makes the NFFC such an interesting challenge. It's like I think both the FFPC and the NFFC are super challenging in their own way. The NFFC requires you to think about these, what about, 2X, 3X, 4X, and how do I factor that in? And the FFPC is more of, how can you get all the brackets right in your playoffs? Because if you do, you stand a better chance. And can you find that one player maybe that's got super big leverage that works throughout 2 or 3 games? And, so it's a fun way either way. But, in this one, I think for Guilds, what I'd say is, you got to think about what you think Tyreek and Kelsey are going to do, not only this week, but the next 2 weeks.
Is there any other option on that roster? Like, do you throw a Pringle in there hoping to be contrarian, or?
I don't think you can at this point.
No, I don't think you can at this point. It's
because then you expect them to do it more than one game, right? At that
Right.
point, which is not going to.
Yeah, the place to get contrarian then would be probably the Super Bowl. If you're going to go, if you're going to do it that way, then you can pop somebody like that in. Now, if you were to ask, do you want to go contrarian with Jerick McKinnon? If you had a whole bunch of these teams, maybe you do on one.
Shout out to Guilds for the question, because A, personally, I have the same decision to make selfishly, but B, that's a great question. Guys, we kind of highlighted that we're going to hit on these 5 players to avoid tonight. But before we do that, Danny, I want to ask you this one question. before we move into the next segment here. What is the one lesson that you learned from 2021?
Well, I think I kind of covered it. I'm reanalyzing my shifts in narratives and so forth.
Mm-hmm. The conviction.
And something that, I don't view myself as a high volume drafter. I mean, the online, I did 25 leagues. To me, that's a lot. To others, that's not. There's some that do 200. But I don't like to differentiate so much my rosters as much, if I really believe in this player. But I had 60% of them are from the 11 and the 12. And after a few drafts, I'm drafting the same guys there. And it's like I shifted. And if I would have stuck with my original plan and not differentiated, I'd have come out better. But would that be true year from year? That book I was telling you about she makes this point is you go through a process. And if you're, she said this is true in poker. Poker players have a process. They may not always win. And if you get a win or a good result, you think because you got a good result that your process was good. And that's not necessarily true. It's just luck. So she says, stick by your process. If you make your judgments based on the results, then that's called resulting. And that's really struck home with me because I differentiated that, am I judging it because I got poor results from it, or was it my process still good? And I like my process. So I don't know. I've just got to look at that. And, some of it's fallen into narratives. I look at Antonio Gibson. Last year, everybody was drafting him like crazy, and I was avoiding him because I wasn't so sure he's going to be a good running back, and I wasn't so sure about Washington being any good. And David Dodds always said, don't draft sucky players from sucky teams, or don't draft players from sucky teams because you're going to get sucky results. And sometimes that's not true, but then I watched him at the end of the year and I go, he's starting to look like a good running back, but they don't throw him the ball. They throw to J.D. McKissick all the time. J.D. McKissick should be the right guy to draft. So somehow I changed that during the year and I got sucked into, they're throwing him the ball. So then I changed my narrative. They're going to throw Antonio Gibson the ball like they did J.D. McKissick, and he's definitely looking like a better running back. He's worthy of being drafted at the end of the first round. If I look at my teams that died, they all had Gibson on them. And I avoided J.D. McKissick. I never drafted J.D. McKissick. Now, if I'd have stuck with my original conviction that I was going to draft the crap out of J.D. McKissick. Now, he did get hurt toward the end of the year, but he was doing really, really well during those bye weeks. And we need a desperate running back too.
The lesson here is fade me. I was on Gibson too.
I still am.
Some Gibson.
I still am
we
to a
love
fault.
Custom Gibson.
Yes,
there's always year 3 with Gibson.
But hey, Danny, you've got Jarrett Patterson now, so there you go.
Yep. Danny, what was the name of that book again? Do you remember?
Life in Bets by Annie Dukes.
And that's one of the number one lessons you learn in poker. I was pretty deep into poker, and that's by far the biggest lesson is follow the process, not the results, because the results are not always telling of the story. And you talk about bettings, and Dan, you talked about like being in a big number of leagues and maybe doing well in a small amount. Look, man, it's like anything else, right? Like crypto or anything where, like Danny talks about investing, putting your money on something. You only need 1 or 2 to hit, right? You only need to win one FFPC main event or one Football Guys. It doesn't really matter if you put in 2, 3, or 10 teams. You want to win that one big one, right? So A lot of great points there by Danny. I hope you guys all had your pen and papers out. Smash the like button. We appreciate all the comments, the questions in the chat. Johannes, always in the house. Kyle, we appreciate you, brother. And keep the questions coming in the comments. Guys, let's get into the topic of the night. Whether it's best ball, we've got a board that we, if we get a chance to look at it, we're at an hour. So that's why I'm kind of hesitant with what I'm going to throw on the table here, but we don't want to keep Danny too long. We do respect your time and we appreciate you very much. Let's talk, whether it's best ball, redraft, or dyno, whatever your reason is, let's talk about guys that, and we already mentioned a few. So if that's, you want to kind of emphasize someone you've already mentioned, or maybe take a different path. Danny, as our guest, who's the first player you want to throw on the table as someone maybe you don't want so much as you go into your 2022 roster builds?
Well, when I first got into fantasy football is with a home league, and is ran by our pastor in our church. And he was a big Green Bay fan, so he would never draft a Chicago Bear, a Detroit Lion, or Minnesota Viking, or any player that used to play for Green Bay and now plays for some other team. And so I really don't have biases like that. It just kind of depends on where they are on the draft board. You said which one I wouldn't draft. I go, well, Blaine Gabbert, but it's more the ones I'm uncomfortable with drafting. And, like this year, when you pull up this draft board, I first went to locate where he was being drafted from, because I don't know if I've got the guts to draft him next year even if he comes back, and I'm talking about Calvin Ridley. Even if he comes back, what if he plays 2 games and then he takes off again? That'd make me very, very reluctant. It's like Charlie Brown and Lucy. He's going to jerk the football away from me. He's talented as all get out, but I don't know if I'll draft him just because I'm paranoid of him.
I can't tell if you've been listening to Dan or it's because both of your names are Dan, but that's Dan. Dan loves the Lucy with the football. It's one of his favorites. That and his flow are probably the closest to his heart.
Yes, definitely. All right, so JD, you need to go before me because I always steal your guy.
All right, yes, and especially since Danny took kind of my backup because I expected you to take my guy, and it might seem like recency bias, but then you can attest to with our DMs that this is something I was thinking about before the playoffs. I was hoping the playoffs might help us, but I gotta go to Dallas, and CeeDee Lamb, as you know, is someone I was hyped about coming into the season. That offense, just like I'm sure a lot of people in fantasy land. But this year, I just didn't see. I didn't see much from CD. Just across the board. Whether it's that connection with Dak, the volume, the consistency, the touchdowns, you name it. The clutch plays. I didn't see anything that I expected out of CeeDee Lamb, and I'm not saying go out and sell low on a piece. To me, it's if your league mates still consider him as a younger player that maybe is still building and gonna fulfill the value that you're paying for, if they still consider him like a top 4, top 5, top 6 receiver dynasty wise, value wise, and I own him, and then I apologize for the piece that we went out and bought in the offseason in that monster league. I mean, we still finished 2nd or 3rd, but it actually, funny enough, the 2 teams I own him on the FFPC, I finished second or 3rd, but he's someone, unless his price really dips, I'm probably going to avoid going into the season. I don't know if you guys differentiate on that.
No, I think that's fair.
Avoid instead of not draft at all.
Well, no, it's never a draft at all. I will always, I'm like you, Danny, and Theo. That's the first thing Theo threw in our DM when we talked about tonight's topic was, it's not necessarily I don't like the dude. It's just I don't like him at his ADP, so we completely respect that, Danny.
Well, I'll tell you what, JD, if I'm seeing CeeDee Lamb first of all,
what's the round? What's the round, Theo?
I'm looking at a 4th round CeeDee Lamb. If that's a 4th round CeeDee Lamb, I'm absolutely considering there, especially in some of these 3 wide receiver formats, which I believe this was a 3 wide receiver league, Dan, or is this a?
I'm not sure. I don't play I haven't played on RT Sports in a couple of years, so I don't know what their default is.
I think they're like the FFPC with the 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and 2 flexes.
I think we'd see the receivers a lot higher in some of these instances if it was 3.
Yeah, that makes sense.
No, I can see your reservations. I do think the one thing with CeeDee Lamb is the smash games were there. He had a number of games where he scored an extremely high number of points. He's flashed that he can be a weekly winner. And we also talked about Deebo Samuel just a little while ago. Year 3 is year 3. So even though CeeDee's produced year 1, year 2, maybe he didn't take the step forward this year. But I don't know if he falls to a spot. I still believe in the talent.
For sure.
I don't know. It's a tough one. I mean, we were taking him at he was going at the 2-3 turn in NFFC last year. I think he'll be drafted a little later this year. So I think, to me, I'm not sure about that one, but I can see your reservations. And I think Dalton Schultz is also a big key. If Schultz re-signs with Dallas, maybe that, you'll see the Dak Schultz connection. But if Schultz is gone, then I think there's absolutely more opportunities for Lamb.
So Lamb had 4 wide receiver 1 and 7 wide receiver 2 weeks, which is very similar to his first season where he had 3 and 7.
Yeah, and I think part of it too with Lamb is, the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season were crappy. If you take all his weekly results and you put them in a bag and you shake them up and then you just draw them out one by one.
But then aren't those the weeks that matter? Like, to me, those are the weeks that matter.
No, those are definitely the weeks that matter. But also, I don't think that that tends to get too much into recency bias because you're just looking at one small sample size. What if those had been the first 4 or 5 weeks instead of the last 4 or 5? If his season had run in reverse order, would you be as dissatisfied with Lamb? Or if you just taken all those weeks and just shake them up and just randomly draw them out, put them, one after another, you might have some big weeks at the end and maybe you would have been a lot happier with them. And again, not to say you're wrong, because I do think there's some fundamental issues with how the Cowboys are using Lamb. And I think that's more what's got to change than any, it's not like a question of his talent or anything else. It's more a question of how he's being used.
I want to throw one more thing in, Dan, that I forgot, and it's kind of crucial to my decision making. Is I also own a few Gallup pieces, and his injury to me was not a good situation for Cooper or Lamb, just because I feel like his value gets hurt big time there. It's a pretty big injury, so he's probably going to end up back in Dallas. I don't see a team going to pay for that injury the way we thought prior to that. So that was another pretty big factor. Knowing Gallup is back there, you'll have Jarwin back, and I don't know. I
think it's fair to question, Lamb, where he's at. Theo, who are you concerned about?
So the first name basically, and when I saw this draft board, it kind of resonated with me. It's Dalvin Cook, who I love Dalvin Cook, and I've had drafted Dalvin Cook for years. I have Dalvin Cook on some Dynasty teams. But take a step back. His points per game this year, forget about the games missed, but the points per game went from 24.1 last year down to about 16 this year. You also factor in the fact that he's turning 27. Then you have the games missed. The COVID stuff, that's just bad luck. But then he missed games for injuries besides that. And then I also look at the coaching change where Zimmer, it was sort of like the identity of a Mike Zimmer team to utilize Dalvin Cook. He's fired an offensive coordinator over not, using the running backs enough. And that was, kind of what the team was built around. I think there's a chance that the next offensive system I believe Dalvin Cook will still be leaned on next year, but I think that there's also a new coaching staff might give a little more work to Madison. And also, Nwangwu was so explosive on special teams. Maybe they use him for a few touches a game. So I think there's just a lot of things that could go wrong in terms of what Dalvin Cook's going to bring you at ADP. If he's still going in the middle of the first round, like here he's going, 5 overall. I'm not going to consider him in the top 5. For next year. I think there's just too many question marks and too many potential things that could go wrong at that cost.
Yeah, I sorry, Dan. I'm just going to jump in because this is kind of the third guy that I have on the list. I love that Theo. Cook is a guy I always worried about. Obviously, he had those 2 seasons in a row with the injuries, but this year I had a couple contenders that I was pretty confident were going to be contenders, and I took the risk on Cook. But I'm kind of in and out. Like now, I'm pretty high on Madison. I mean, he showed us that when Cooks isn't there, he can produce. He's only 23 and a half. Madison, and like you talked about, we're going to see a new coaching staff coming in there. Anytime the new coaching staff comes in, there's going to be some kind of shakeups. So I'm not as confident on Dalvin Cook. And as much as I love him as a running back, Dan, no offense to your Vikings, he's not someone I will be on into this season. So I agree with you there, Theo. Danny, how do you feel about the running back in Minnesota?
Yeah, I think it's fair to, there's a lot of things you can question about him. The other thing is, does he get used with the new coaching staff? Does he get used as a pass catcher more? And if that's the case, then, he can probably recoup a lot of his value. He's somebody I would be, I would kind of be sort of concerned about, given where he fell in this draft. I wouldn't really have too much of a problem drafting him 6th.
For those listening, yeah, he finished 5th. He went he went as the 105.
Right. So, yeah, it's 105. Yeah, this is a 10-teamer rather than a 12-teamer. So always got to keep that in mind. But I'll give you one that I look at, and I hate to say it, but AJ Brown, where he's at, gives me a little bit of a cause for concern. His highest finish is wide receiver 12, and he's probably like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, wide receiver 9 here. So I think that's a pretty aggressive ranking of AJ Brown. We've seen, we've seen what he is for a couple seasons, and we have to be concerned about how often he gets injured a little bit. I think we have to be concerned about the amount of times that the Tennessee's going to throw to him. The volume's just not there like it is with some receivers. So you really need an efficient season from AJ Brown, and he's definitely capable of being that efficient. But to ask that for a full season, that's a little bit tough. I would put AJ Brown, looking at this draft, I'd put him back more with, the right around where probably Deontay Johnson, T. Higgins, Elijah Moore, Chris Godwin, in that range. I think that's probably a better range to take him. And it hurts me to say this because I'm such an AJ Brown fan, but I just might not own as much of them in this next year.
Depressing to hear that, Dan. That's
I'm hurt.
Sad one.
I know, right? It was hard to say.
Maybe he'll fall in the 7th round and be the 7th round guy.
There you go.
Yes, let's hope for that.
In that first draft, Dan, take him in. We'll leave him for you. Just take him in that 702, 703 spot.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I gotta plant some flags in that draft. So let's hope I get the 101.
So Danny, I was actually asking you, but Dan is just, he's just used to, Danny. He's not used to having another Dan bro in the house. So what are your thoughts on AGB, and what are your thoughts on Theo's Dalvin Cook avoid or fade?
Well, I've spent a lot of time looking at all my drafts and everything, and I noticed all my Dalvin Cook teams just went down the tubes early. And 2 years ago, I faded Cook, and I wish I wouldn't have. And last year, I drafted him, and he won me some leagues. And like one of those teams, they said, "Oh, that was you smashed that draft." I mean, you got Dalvin Cook, Mark Andrews, AJ Brown, and that league just was one of the first ones to die. I agree with the Cook. I'm shocked that he went there. I would have figured Eckler had gone before him.
Yeah, this was some weird ADP on some of these picks.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So let's see, Danny, you got another one that concerned you here?
Geez, you kind of stole mine with that AJ Brown.
How do you guys feel about Deebo Samuel? Like, how high do you think he should be? He's in this one. He's in the second round towards the end. I guess it's a 10 man. So maybe you put him early to mid second. Is that kind of where you'd be drafting him, or is he kind of the avoid going into the season because maybe his value's at a peak? I see Theo just discouraged.
It's a very hard one, and I was on this Deebo train for a little while where I thought he was going to get to a point where, especially with regards to NFFC, where he's going to get to a point where he's going a little too high. But at the end of the day, he's getting high value touches in every single game. George Kittle looks like he's not quite himself. We could say that. Like, you know, he shines at times, but it's not the consistent every game that you'd expect from him. And Brandon Ayuk is not taking the step forward. So at the end of the day, you know, Deebo Samuel, if he's getting high value touches and it's Shanahan's guy, he's a good enough coach that he's going to get Deebo in a place where, you know, he's probably going to produce. Maybe Deebo's going to get to a point where he's not necessarily a fade, but not necessarily a winner at ADP. But gosh, the talent is it's unbelievable how explosive he is. And he's got the ideal coach. And I think Mike McDaniel needs some credit at this point. The guy seems so sharp every time you hear him speak. But I don't know. For weeks and weeks, I'm going to go district Deebo Samuel. I would bring up next year Deebo is going to go overdrafted. But I don't know. I'm sort of taking a step back and saying I think he might end up being returning value where he is. Not necessarily winning you the league, but I think that if he's in the late second, early third, absolutely, I think you have to consider him. The guy looks fantastic. We do have to take into account, and Danny brought this up, that he does have an injury history, and that's something you want to keep in the back of your mind. But gosh, I mean, the guy looks so good right now. And shout out to Billy Muzio, who was on this podcast and also has been talking about. He was for weeks and weeks was Deebo Samuel over AJ Brown in Dynasty. And at first, you know, that was kind of hard to get around. But I think at this point, Billy was ahead of the curve on that one.
Shout out to Muzio making me laugh in the DMs as I'm live on the show. I was telling he's making me laugh earlier. I had to mute my mic. I want to ask you guys about another guy because, you know, Deebo Samuel, Elijah Mitchell are two guys I owned a lot of. The third guy that I either picked up, you know, for cheap or ended up with was Cordarrelle Patterson. And I'm curious to know where do you guys see him? Danny, our guest, I'll have to specify. Where do you see Patterson? He was, you know, in some leagues a receiver, some leagues a running back. Similar to Deebo, he's very versatile. He kind of flexed in Atlanta. You know, he's kind of his 93rd year breakout. Where do you value him now as you approach these drafts going into the 2022?
Well, that's interesting. I think later on you mentioned what was your most owned player. You know, my most owned player in the NFC was Elijah Mitchell. Out of my 25, well, actually it was 31 teams. I drafted him 19 times.
Nice.
Wow. Jamie, we may have found somebody who was even bigger on Mitchell than us.
Yes.
I you know, because I studied Dynasty, I remember watching him play against Iowa State, and I go, that guy's fast. Mm-hmm. But I was a Sermon. I really believed in Trey Sermon, so I would draft Sermon and I'd handcuff him you could get him in the 19th or 20th round, Elijah Mitchell, as a handcuff. And lo and behold, Elijah Mitchell wins it. And so he went to the first waiver wire. I didn't have to put any waiver wire claims for him because I already had him. It's just stroke of luck. And in the league I come in second, I actually looked and I tried to drop him in the first waiver wire run before the first week, and I put in a tentative bid for somebody and lost. Oh, boy, I dodged a bullet with that because he was a valuable player for me. And Cordell Patterson is my most owned waiver wire. He was in my draft. I'll give him credit. Glenn Lowy. I study drafts, and first waiver run, I look and see what others people do, and I noticed that. Now I had seen Patterson play in the first and second game, and I thought, man, they're using him different. He looks different, but I didn't have the guts to put a waiver claim on him. But I noticed Glenn Lowy, the leagues I was in with him, he picked up Patterson in the first waiver run. So all my other leagues. The second waiver wire run, I put in a small bid for Cordell Patterson, and I got like 10 or 11 shares of him. And he was a regular starter the rest of the year. But I worry about him being a one-hit wonder. I mean, you notice at the end of the year, they kind of had him figured out, and he didn't score much the last few games. So I'm questionable on him. Of course, Mitchell obviously kind of proved his stripes. I see he went here in the third round. Well, this 10, that's probably a good spot for him. I don't think I'd regard him as a dead zone running back. He should be drafted probably in the second round next year, and I'll probably be drafting him.
Yeah, it's funny if Mitchell was a third round draft pick, doing what he's done this season, and then having the game he had last game, and just looking the way he does, and also being able to handle a high volume of touches, he'd be a smash second round pick for next year. But I think that there's always in the back of your head the fact that he was a sixth round pick, makes people a little nervous, for the following season. But I mean, he certainly looks the part of a guy who could go even higher than this, especially if they win in Green Bay and he goes nuts. And Cordero, I don't know. You've got to expect a ton of new faces on Atlanta's offense. So I think that like right where Cordero went here, like that 10th round, I think that's kind of probably where he'll settle in. I don't think, obviously a 10th round pick's not going to lose your league, but I think kind of at best he's kind of a purgatory player, like a bye week fill-in guy. I would expect that Atlanta's not going to get away from him completely because he was so good for Arthur Smith in his first year. But you've got to think that they're going to bring in some wide receivers and also some running backs. And also you have Kyle Pitts, in year two taking a step forward. So that offense is going to look completely different. I would be wary of spending a lot of draft capital on Cordero for sure.
The funny thing about Elijah Mitchell, and I noticed this, I don't know why I did this. I drafted him so heavily in the NFC, and I did the NFCs, and then I did the Kentucky drafts, and I didn't draft him in Kentucky. And I did the FFPC. I didn't draft him in any of those leagues. And I go, why did I do that? I don't know why I did that. I guess maybe I thought I was overexposed. But what difference does that make with the FFPC?
Trying to balance it out, right?
Sometimes it works like that, though. I mean, I had most of my Fournette exposure in the NFFC. I had a lot less in the FFPC. Whereas somebody like James Conner, I had more, across the board. So, sometimes it just works that way.
Cooper Kupp for me. Cooper Kupp, I had more in the FFPC than the NFFC. You're right. It's and Jamar Chase FFPC over NFFC. So it's funny how those things go.
Yep. All right. Let's see, JD, you got somebody else? Another fade?
Another one we haven't mentioned. If I'm looking real quick, I mean, I kind of brought up the ones that stood out to me. Looking real quick here.
Well, I have another one if you want to wait, JD.
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Similar to Danny's Calvin Ridley, who but times 100 is Michael Thomas.
Yeah.
People are starting. So Calvin Ridley, the guy's got some mental health things he's working on, and you've got to factor in the fact that he's going to be on a new team. But I think overall, I could see Calvin Ridley bouncing back, but I can't see Michael Thomas coming back and doing the things he used to do in fantasy. I think there's a lot of people I've seen people suggesting all these great landing spots for Michael Thomas again. You know, Michael Thomas is going to go to the Chiefs. Michael Thomas is going to go to – I mean, people are just getting behind this train. I mean, the guy's shown that he had some issues as a teammate and also had some issues with his head coach. He signed the big contract, and then it was all downhill. I have so many reservations about Michael Thomas. I have no doubt he's going to land on another team.
Where did he go in this draft, Theo? I'm trying to find him.
He's in the fourth round.
What
He's
the
ahead
hell?
He's ahead of. So this draft is goofy, but if you're in a league where Michael Thomas is going ahead of Deontay Johnson and Jalen Waddle, and T. Higgins and Chris Godwin, and you know, it's just I would not consider him ahead of any of those guys. If I'm going to consider Michael Thomas, it's going to be. Gosh, I mean, it's not like a never. It's not like a never say never thing. Like I would consider drafting him if the cost is quite low. But
in the 19th round of a best ball, sure.
I'd have very, very low expectations on him kind of getting it together. And I think that the team he lands with has got to be a really, really good fit with a very high quality quarterback for me to kind of get back on that train.
Well, OTC guys, Deontay Johnson or Michael Thomas, like, is that even close?
It's not even in the same strata.
It's not even in the same. Yeah, like I'm looking at the guys going around him, and I don't see any of these guys.
No.
Maybe Lockett. I mean, is heading in that direction. Otherwise,
here's a better one for you: Hunter Renfrow versus Michael Thomas. I'm taking Renfrow every single time.
And where's Renfrow going? And where's Renfrow going?
Beginning of the 6th.
In the 6th. So you're talking about 3 rounds later.
Yeah. So Michael
and
Thomas,
even Renfrow, I've I'm doing this dispersal and he came up. I question.
Spoiler alert. I have Renfrow as one of my 5 tonight, but just
that you avoid
as at cost.
I love that.
I think it's just Michael Thomas is not the kind of guy. I certainly don't go at him in Dynasty. I think that in Dynasty, people are always trying to unload their Thomas shares, and I think when you get to the offseason, people have this optimism for him again. I think that it's just not the guy you want, and I think that there's so much downside, and it's going to have to be like a thread the needle type upside for Michael Thomas to work out next year for me. And I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, but I think that he'd absolutely avoid anywhere in the first 6 rounds.
I'm going to point out that same drafter took CMC and Zeke Elliott as his first 2 picks. I'll just point that out because I think that's important.
Would have been helpful.
Hitting on anyone and cover those names.
If it was 2019, we'd be in good shape.
Pretty
Absolutely.
much.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Would he be the candidate for the wide receiver that falls in the 7th round that's going to win leagues?
I'm looking for the guy who hasn't really, hasn't had his peak season. I think Michael Thomas is, when you're hoping for the rebound, I don't know. It's tough.
No, but there's only one receiver that did go in this 7th round. I mean, again, it's a 10-man, but you got DJ Moore there, which it's interesting.
DJ Moore in the 7th round would be an absolute smash. You can talk about his quarterback situation being up in the air in Carolina, to say the least. But that talent in the 7th round, I'd be all over that one.
Yeah, after Hunter Renfrow. To me, one of the ones that I think is going to be overdrafted, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him go in, the 5th round a lot, is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's just kind of a product of,
situation.
Situation being in the right place at the right time. I mean, there's no question that if the NFL draft is held again, St. Brown would be a day 2 pick rather than a day 3 pick at this point. His talent is definitely there, but I also think that with Detroit, you've just got, Swift was out for a good chunk of the season. Hawkinson was out for a good chunk of the season. You know that they're likely to, add some more weapons here. Whether it's probably going to be this year that they add some more weapons. They can do, there's a lot of wide receivers that are going to be available through free agency. They could add one in the draft in the second or third round. So he's going to have a lot more competition for targets. So I think it's going to be a lot tougher. I mean, you look at him, and then you look at somebody like Darnell Mooney, who went, basically 5 rounds later. And, to me, Mooney went at a much more appropriate spot because he's also somebody who probably is going to have a little bit more competition for targets than what he had this past year. So I think those two probably belong in kind of the same area of the draft.
That was another one of the guys I had on my list, Dan. So I just got JD'd on that one.
I'm here for you.
There you go.
Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, the same thing Dan said. Dan hit the nail on the head with that one. I mean, even if they don't add wide receivers, a healthy Swift and a healthy TJ Hawkinson would have taken away from this finish. I do think Amon-Ra St. Brown is interesting. I have him as a fade, but I do think if they add like an alpha wide receiver one, and there's certainly a lot of free agents, and there's a couple guys in the draft that look like they could be that. And I think that if you have a healthy Swift and you have a healthy Hawkinson, I think there's a chance that Amon-Ra goes in this spot in early best ball drafts, but then maybe by the end of August he gets back into the hey, let's consider drafting him. So that's some galaxy braining, but I think at this point Dan is spot on with Amon-Ra.
Yeah, a lot of these ADPs are going to really move around, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. As we get more information.
All right, guys, we've kept Danny way too long, 90 minutes, dropped a ton of goodness. And, I hope you guys had your pens and paper. I know I wrote down a few notes. Danny, we really appreciate your time. Remind the people where they can find you on the Twitter machine, anything else you want to share. And we'd love to have you back, brother. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure what my Twitter handle is. Danny Mueller, I think.
At Danny Mueller 1. Yes, at Danny Mueller 1.
It has one because Danny Mueller is already taken.
So don't follow just plain Danny Mueller. Add the one.
Right. Yes. He is number one, so you got to add the one.
Guys, go follow Danny at Danny Mueller. Hopefully you enjoyed tonight's show and all the goodness he brought. The experience is invaluable, and I mean the track record just speaks for itself. A portfolio that I hope to one day aspire to, Danny. So we appreciate you tuning in and just the kind words that you shared with us tonight. We appreciate all of it. Theo, last thoughts on tonight, this week, the playoffs, anything you want to talk about going in this offseason. I know we're kind of planning these next 3-4 months for the peeps. So maybe you touch on that.
No, we're just trying to get as many great guests as we can. When I spoke to Danny, I said, you're like the best player who hasn't come on the GOAT District. So we've had a lot of great players. This was awesome tonight to get to hear your process and talk to you. This was just a great one. So we really appreciated this one, and I think that we've got some great guests lined up.
I look forward to your guests. Y'all have had a murderer's row of great talent.
Yeah, we appreciate that. I mean, it's just, we try to grab people who are interesting to us, people that I want to learn from, and that's the most important thing is, if you want to get better, never stop growing. And that's, look at Danny, he's still looking for, people to get, interesting ideas from, things that you can do differently. Yeah. Steal from. I mean, it's exactly what it is. But, everybody needs to be stealing from the best. And Danny is definitely one of the best. So, and, again, if nothing else proved it, just looking at that league where, he just kind of walks in, I haven't done this. I haven't done this style of draft for 5 years. And I'm going to walk into a murderer's row league, and I'm just going to not only win that league, but I'm going to take second place in the whole dang contest. yeah, that's very, very impressive. So thank you for coming on, and we're more than happy to have you on again. We just enjoy talking with all the best fantasy players. So and Johannes, yes, Johannes agrees. Here we go.
Sorry, Dan, we keep double clicking on the comments.
Joanna says, "Thanks, guys. Bring on Danny again. He's funny with the stories." Yes, no doubt about it. So thanks for coming on, and we got some more great ones lined up. I'm really excited for best ball season too, because we've got we're going to be starting probably on Sunday. We've got a best ball league lined up for the FFPC. We've got our 12 people already lined up. I've emailed Alex. Here's our guys. Get us going as soon as possible, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So. In the first few best ball leagues, the ADP is the Wild West. It is what you think it is. So I'm very much looking forward to that one.
We've got a loaded draft too. Dan put together a really, really, really good list of players for that one. So I'm excited to compete against some good ones in that draft.
To kick it off, right? And it's the baller, the hard way baller. Best ball league. We try to get in on that first one, but guys, check it out. It'll be on our Twitter. He's at the Overhyped Sleeper, no E on the end, at the OG Fantasy, at Danny Mueller 1. Smash the like, smash the subscribe, guys. Show your support. We appreciate everyone in the chat tonight. And we talked about Danny being the one guest, the best guest that has not been on the show. If someone else comes to mind, we've had Danny and you're listening or watching, make sure you tag us and let us know, or in the comments on the YouTube channel, as to who you'd like to see, who your favorite high stakes beast is, or favorite analyst is. And like we said, guys, stick with us this offseason. We got a ton of best ball with Ballin. We'll do some live drafts. We'll analyze and look back on some drafts. We've touched on one that's coming up. Best of luck to you guys this weekend, guys. Enjoy the football. Put fantasy aside. Grab a nice drink, some snacks, some popcorn, whatever it is you like to snack on, and enjoy the football, guys. I think sometimes we get too, my wife will point out, you watch a game and it's like almost she's discouraged, to watch the rest of it, because I'm like pissed because this guy grabbed it instead of this guy got the reception. Guys, enjoy the football. Enjoy the games. We got some good ones coming up. Hope you all kick ass in your playoff challenges, and stick with us. We'll be here very soon with some more goodness, guys. Thank you very much. We'll check you all later.
District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.